That was a really great question. And the question is the morality of a land value tax. Now, of course, going in front of a city council, I don't hesitate to bring it up because they'll come back at you and say how, before I even get the idea across, that this is immoral. What they're saying, what a lot of people that I would say are more conservative would say, you're trying to help the government take my land, and that's immoral. So luckily, people call me immoral first. Once they call me immoral first, I have a good counter argument. But we always talk about what is more fair, what is equitable and just. And what we always say, and when we're going into a city or in front of a legislature, is why should somebody, I spend most of my time in front of neighborhood groups, the pyramid of who I talk to. Why should somebody who on their own dime and their own time they've made a conscious decision to improve their lives, and perhaps unconsciously, they're also improving the neighborhood and they're improving the whole community. Why on earth, pun intended, why on earth should they be penalized for it? Why in the end, and this is not a left or right argument, why in the end does the government get to say stick them up when they're essentially taking from you, the individual, or you, the neighborhood, or you, the community? I agree with you. And bringing up a moral argument, some people are embarrassed. I had a predecessor in my position. He graduated from the Henry George School in 1952. And he gave me 2 ironclad rules when I got this job. Abjure assessors. That was probably his most important lesson, you know, people that value land and buildings. But he also said, abjure moral arguments. They'll burn you at the stake. I don't think that's true. And so in every argument that we've had where we're trying to convince people, we go to the basic all-American, you know, I'm working mostly in the United States, the all-American ideal of fair play. Why, in Philadelphia, why does Comcast, the biggest corporate monster, and they're not popular in Philadelphia, they might be up here. Why does Comcast get a total abatement on their taxes, and people in North Philadelphia who haven't had a job, and their father hadn't had a job, and their father's father hadn't had a job for 30 years, why do they have to pay the freight? So the moral argument is not to be avoided. It's to be, when we get into these numbers, and ironically, you'll see my moral argument when I get into the numbers that I use consistently. You have to have a principled and ethical reason. This is not just a good idea or a good tax policy. I mean, it is that, but it's also something that's right, that very few people feel bad about. If I go to a poor neighborhood in North Philadelphia, and I'll say, I don't know if you know North Philadelphia, but it is very poor, very African American, and full of homeowners, which is kind of rare. Homeowners. People own their own homes, because all of these families all worked in factories until 1970. So they own their homes, and they keep their homes up, even though they're poor. So I'll say to the audience, as I always do, what happens if you keep your home up? What happens if you have to do a major repair where you have to, in the parlance, pull a permit? Your taxes go up. And everybody, they know the answer. And then, because I'm familiarizing myself with this community, and I'm there a lot, I say, that vacant lot there, who owns it? And they go, I know who owns it. And it's somebody that owns 300 vacant lots, and their address is Margate, New Jersey. I don't know if you know Margate, New Jersey, but it's a beautiful resort where people of wealth see the sunrise over the Atlantic Ocean every day. He owns that lot. So I said, what happened when that house burned down? Because you could see that it burned down. It took people only a few seconds. His taxes went down. So what could be more immoral? For wrecking the neighborhood, for decreasing property values, because every abandoned, blighted, or vacant house means lower values for your house. How immoral is it that because that house has been burned to the ground after years as a crack house, his taxes go down to $200 a year? And if you keep your house up, you pay $6,000 a year? Anyhow, yes, it's a moral argument.
One more question on a different subject, language. I think we have to, really sort of change the conversation and work with the language. So I have two questions about it. One is, do you ever try to use the language of the commons and the Commonwealth, and especially in the New England area, connected to how there always used to be in the center of every town a commons, and the idea that I think some of the states, I'm not sure if it's Massachusetts, maybe Pennsylvania, are actually commonwealths, and the notion that there is such a thing as a commonwealth. So that's a language issue that I want to ask you if you deal with it. And the other one is the word tax. One of the Georgists we all familiar with, Fred Harrison, has said he made a lifetime mistake in arguing for land value tax, because as soon as you say that three-letter word tax, everybody shuts down. So have you ever tried to promulgate these ideas by avoiding the word tax? Is that even possible to somehow explain how we're going to collect the Commonwealth? Frame it in a whole different kind of a narrative, or is that too not directly connecting to your audiences?
That's a good question. Now, the word tax is a four-letter word. Yeah, it really is. And people are terrified, citizens are terrified by taxes, especially in cities, especially if they're poor or working class people, because they get hammered by taxes. Speaking by definition, I have to speak to elected officials, and they're uncomfortable with me not using the word tax. When I first went in front of Allentown, which enacted this by a popular vote, we had to bypass the city council eventually and put it up to a popular vote. That's the only way we could get it passed. But I tried to describe the property tax as we were proposing it as a kind of a rent. Well, many of us are familiar with the concept of rent, economic rent. Every economist is, and maybe a few other people. But rent, when I brought it up, this was 1996. Rent, I rent a video. Okay, council, what I mean is there is this fund that exists due to all the investment we've made, all the citizens have paid for, and also the locational value of land because of where it is. And there is something inherent called rent. And rent is owed in equal parts to every citizen. I hate to say it, but that went over, it went over like a lead balloon. I have to call it a tax also because I want to kill taxes. We all do. We want to get rid of the income tax. We want to get rid of the sales tax. We want to get rid of unfair and regressive taxes. So at best, and this is where I would reach out to everybody at all times, help me find a replacement word. I've been using user fee, and that's getting some traction, or a charge.
Surcharge.
Yeah, a surcharge for, and surcharge is actually, thank you. I'll try it out. A surcharge for use of the land, and not the land itself. You've got free and clear title, but all of the services and all of the value that's conferred by all of your brothers and sisters on this planet. And people are opening up to that, I think, simply because the system has really come crashing to a halt. The economic system in this country and elsewhere. People are scared, more scared than they were. I mean, you're talking about industrial Pennsylvania cities for the most part, my job. And their fear, that was hard to overcome. But they had to, in a sense. They almost had no choice. But replacing the word tax with some other phrase where people don't argue, because people love to argue in public settings, especially with elected officials. I mean, they get paid to talk and to shuck and jive and avoid decisions. So with the neighborhood group, they're into that idea. They believe it because they know it's true, that if a vacant lot is turned into a public parklet, they know that their values go up. Their ownership stake increases in value because everybody got together. So it's possible, but those are citizens. Unfortunately, the citizens don't make the decisions, their elected reps do.